the personal is still political. Not all feminists mean or have meant the same thing by the slogan, "The personal is political." There are some elements of continuity though, namely recognizing that dominant ways of defining the political constitute an artificial narrowing, whose function is to exclude women, rendering their oppression invisible and blocking their liberation. Also, admitting that the way in which we define the political is itself a political matter. There are also differences. So the original context of the slogan was the political struggle at the end of the 1960s, when more and more women began forming their own groups and organizations to try to change social structure. This was partly a response to the sexism they faced within existing left movements and anti-war movements. In published form, the slogan originally appeared in an article by Carol Hanisch, included in the anthology Notes from the Second Year, Women's Liberation in 1970. However, in her introduction to the 2006 republication of the essay, Hanisch wrote that she did not come up with the title. She believed "The Personal is Political" was selected by the editors of the anthology, Shulamith Firestone and Ann Kurd, who were both feminists involved with the group the New York Radical Feminists. Some feminist scholars have noted that by the time the anthology was published in 1970, "The Personal is Political" had already become a widely used part of the women's movement and was not a quote that could be attributed to any one person. At the time Hanisch was writing, the male-dominated political left often posed an opposition between personal and political issues. Thus, if women held a discussion group around personal issues, it was derisively referred to as therapy, a designation that Hanisch pointed out was misguided. In actuality, Hanisch argued women's personal problems were political problems, inasmuch as they were caused by women's inequality. Women themselves were not to blame. By extension, the problems could not be solved by personal solutions, but only by social change. Many feminist groups embraced this idea. For instance, the radical feminist organization Red Stockings claimed that women fail to see their situation as a political condition because of a class hierarchy that exists with men placed above women. Similarly, the Combahee River Collective, a black organization, stressed that its feminism included insights that were gleaned from members' personal experiences with racism and sexism. Other documents from that period feature similar arguments. This understanding of the personal is political differs from the liberal contemporary perspective. Liberal theory views the family as belonging to the private sphere, which for a long time implied that it had very little, if any, political significance. Feminist thinking in this tradition pointed out that this attitude amounts to the exclusion of women from politics. The issue for liberal feminists is not whether the state can intervene in the family and reproduction, but how and to what ends. This might imply that the state might encourage some family types rather than others through educational curricula or other sanctioned means, or that it should take a role in providing care for children and the elderly and in rewarding the work of caregiving. The slogan "The Personal is Political" says something more than the fact that sex, marriage are political issues. It raises the question of what counts as political action. Hanisch and other radical feminists of the second wave argue that certain ways of talking and organizing, for example, the model of the small group, the practice of consciousness raising, far from being apolitical, were legitimate and even indispensable modes of resistance. If personal actions and discussions can be forms of political resistance, then it seems to follow that it matters politically what sorts of political decisions we make. However, many feminists also responded that it is up to individual women to live their personal lives as they see fit. So, should feminism aim to dictate which politically correct lifestyles women should adopt? This question poses a dilemma. It seems right to resist a feminism that consists of a series of imperatives as to how to organize your personal life. A personal solutionary feminism seems overly didactic, divisive, individualistic, shortening women's perspective and focusing their attention on evaluating their own and each other's particular ways of existing within the social reality, which itself needs change. But also, on the second horn of the dilemma, it seems important to insist on the political dimension of personal, aiming to extend prevalent conception of politics and to resist the brand of feminism which portrays all choices as being equally valid. The fact that certain aspects of the private sphere have been issues of concern for feminists implies that they must be recognized as political problems so that the right kind of action can be taken. The slogan, "The personal is political," opens up a space for a certain kind of critique and multiple forms of resistance. There is more than one way in which a feminist might respond when convinced by a critique which concerns some aspect of the private life. What counts as good or useful or less bad response will depend on various features of that context. If we begin to see certain phenomena belonging to personal life as political, then it is possible to see them as the result of a broader social structure, rather than as consequence of nature or of personal choice or personal failing. We might not be able to infer from this directly what is the correct way to live an individual life, but it might allow us to arrive at a more realistic view of the difficulties we face as women and a better understanding of what would take to overcome them. The fact that there might not be a single correct set of personal choices to structure the daily life of a feminist does not mean that the personal cannot be a site of political action, which can take the form of rebellion, resistance, or even revolution.